Welcome back, everyone. This is Shadow Drake, and so today's topic would be about the Stirling engines, and I got quite a bit of information to go over for this one. Um, the basic gist of this engine is you can search it up on Stationpedia, but it needs some high pressure hot gas in the input pipe. It will take some of that thermal energy to convert it to power, and it is compared to the room's temperature, which should be a fairly high pressurized and relatively cool temperature. It has specific working ranges for the temperature gradient, and so keeping the room cool is the main challenge for this engine. But it can generate quite a bit of power for you. Up to 8 kilowatts of power is what it's capped at. But then you have this little blurb over here. The overpressurizing the unit may have suboptimal results. Basically, boom. So if the pressure of the Stirling engine's working gas and the room's pressure differential exceed 11 megapascals, you get boom. And so to illustrate the concept of the boom, currently I have some hot gas in this pipe. This is gas from... Why don't I have my tablet ready? This is some basically H2 combustor output, and it actually came out at 2300 Celsius, and you can tell this is H2 combustor output because of the hot steam, and so it has quite a lot of thermal energy in there. And so to start it off, you may not know what you're doing. You know, you have a canister of volatiles with 150 moles of gas. You insert the thing, turn it on, and because it's in a vacuum, it takes some time, but you see that pressure is, oh boy. Boom! There you go. Fun stuff, right? It definitely damages stuff. If you were right there staring at it, boom, you're dead. Alright, well, let's undo this mistake. Be right back. Alright, now that we're back from that mistake, let's get talking. So again, I'm gonna split up this video into several parts. I'm gonna be talking about the hidden mechanics behind the Stirling, and yes, I'm melting some ice in here because we need a pressurized environment. And while I'm doing that, before I get to that, some of this information I found on the station wiki, but a majority of the information was on a Reddit post called the Comprehensive Analysis on the Stirling Engine that was posted about 2 years ago, and I used that to really help me with the Stirling Engine and how it works. So again, I'm going to split up the video to several parts. So first, let's talk about the hidden internals. So now, the Stirling Engine, it has one chamber that you can see with the Atmo tablet, but it also has three other hidden chambers, and those are all important for how this whole thing functions. So it is not an insulated device, so this 54-liter chamber will convect to the environment, but also there is a 5-liter piston chamber called a cold chamber that will also convect with the environment. So we don't see that information, but it does convect. There is another 5-liter hot piston chamber, and that will heat exchange with a 10-liter heat exchange chamber. Again, all of these are hidden. Now, the 10-liter heat exchange chamber, how that functions for the Stirling is when you turn this on, and it has a canister and it works, what it does is it heat exchanges with the input pipe. So in this case, it'll be 2300 Celsius mixed with all this stuff, you know. It pulls enough to equalize pressures for that 10-liter segment. After it does that, it heat exchanges with the hot piston, that 5-liter hot piston chamber, to get our hot temps. And then it will heat exchange with the output pipe. Now, because it equalizes with the output pipe, not heat exchange. Because it equalizes with the output pipe, what that means is some stuff gets left inside the input chamber. I mean, the heat exchange chamber. So when it next tries to work again, some of that gunk mixes with the input pipe. Well, because it's lower temp, because stuff has happened to it, you know, the temperatures will equalize for between the input pipe and that tiny little gunk that was left. So you'll see the input pipe temperature drop slightly. And then it'll repeat the process. Heat exchange with the hot piston, equalizes with the output. So you're going to see a lot of leftover heat in the output pipe, and you're also going to see some of the heat draining from the input pipe. That's all because of that hidden 10-liter chamber. So eventually, it's going to burn out through all of that energy. What's left in here, most of it is going to get convected to the atmosphere. Some of it will get converted to power. So that's the hidden internals of the Stirling. I will mention that if the Stirling runs, the stuff inside that 10-liter heat exchange chamber is still in there. You cannot get it out unless you pull the output pipe to a vacuum or just completely disassemble the Stirling. So just be warned that there is some gas left inside the Stirling. Alright, so that explains how the internals kind of work. So now let's get to the math part. And again, feel free to skip around to what you need. So the first things we're going to talk about, let me just put one in here, a canister in here. Unlike the 150 mole canister, this one has been calculated and should be absolutely safe. So let me just turn it on briefly, get some power, so that I can see all my Stirling information screen. Now, the annoying thing is the logic for the Stirling does not give us a lot of this information. Only this little display gives us stuff. The temperature hot side is what the hot piston chamber got to. The temperature cold side is what the cold piston chamber also got to. And then you have your 3 efficiencies. And that's what we're going to be talking about mainly. Now, because I turned this on, yep, you see that this was pure H2 combustor stuff. This is my pipe. This all came from an H2 combustor and came out at 2300 Celsius. But when I turned that Stirling, this pipe only had pure volatiles in it. So you see that some of the volatiles in here mixed with my input pipe, and it is also why some of the temperatures dropped. So that's that 10-liter heat exchange chamber at work doing its stuff. So now I bet you're wondering, alright, let's talk about the many things. So what is a safe canister fill rate? So to get that, you determine it mathematically by the ideal gas formula, PV equals nRT. Now, I will say that what makes the Stirling go boom is what's in that 54-liter chamber. If the pressure from in that chamber exceeds a differential between its environment of 11 megapascals, that goes boom. That whole thing goes boom. So if you sit the Stirling in a very highly pressurized environment, you can actually technically let this go higher. And this does not depend on whether it's a canister or a smart canister. All that really does is determines whether you can safely store the working gas in there without the canister going boom. So yeah. So back to the math. In this case, we're going to use P equals 11,000. Our volume is going to be 64, which is kind of simple because it's what the canister is. But also 64 is the total volume of what the working gas in the Stirling is. The 54-liter chamber that we can see with the tablet, and then the 2 5-liter hidden ones. So you can use 64. It gives you a nice fudge factor. R is our ideal gas law, 8.3144, and of course T will be whatever your hottest temp is in Kelvin. For here, 2300 Celsius, that's 2572.5 Kelvin, roughly. Probably a little bit more. Actually, it is a little bit more. I forgot that I lost some of that energy. Anyway, so calculate it. N is 11,000 times 64 divided by 8.314 times 2573. That's 32.9 moles, which is what I got in here. Now, one thing that I must specify about this. This isn't the max. This is what I would recommend you start with. Why? Because of the little intricacies of the chambers and the Stirling, technically only 54 out of 64 of this is in that 54-liter chamber. So 64 out of 64 out of 54 is roughly 20%. So technically, a better starting point would be 39 moles, because that's roughly what that would be. And this is the theoretical case where for some reason your Stirling doesn't convect any temperature outside, like its environment is its environmental temp matches the input temp, and so therefore the whole gas heats up to that. This is when you would be in the danger of the boom, assuming your environment was 100 kilopascals or a vacuum or something like that. So that's why I said this is a starting point, because in theory, your Stirling is going to be in 1 Celsius versus 2300 Celsius. A lot of that energy is going to get dissipated. It's going to stay cool. It's going to have a hard time reaching boom pressure. So that's why I said starting point. The reason why you want to use more working gas is it will affect the pressure efficiency calculations and how much power you get out of it. We'll cover that in a little bit. Now, as far as working gas, volatiles has the highest efficiency at 15%. Nitrous, nitrogen, and oxygen are 12%, so a little bit worse. And then if you really even want to consider CO2 pollutants and steam, yeah, they're pretty much garbage tier. I will say that any of this condensing, any liquids, count as complete 0%. It only cares about gas. So what that means for, example, nitrous, if half of it is liquid nitrous, the other half is gaseous nitrous, excuse me, your total efficiency is about 6% for the working gas. And the reason I'm going over this is because on Saturn and Mimas, they give you a crate for Stirling engine supplies. So they give you the engine, the parts to build it, 2 medium radiators for dispelling heat, joy, pipe valve, 2 pipe valves, mind you, and cows, because I guess they just want you to just dump out the heat outside. So yeah, and that comes with a Stirling engine gas canister package, which is 50 moles of nitrogen. They could have given us the volatiles. That could have been better, but whatever. That's good. That's still 12%. So yeah, we can work with that. So that covers the canister. Again, canister or smart canister does not matter. Does not impact the performance of the Stirling. It still goes boom at 11 megapascals. Difference. So let me just slot that back on, turn it on briefly. So now we're going to talk about the 3 efficiencies, because all those 3 efficiencies affect the power generated. So let's talk about the environmental operating efficiency. That one is straightforward. The temperature of the environment it's in determines that efficiency. Now, there is a curve on the Wiki chart, and to stay above 90% efficiency, it looked like roughly negative 55 Celsius to 127 Celsius. You get a good efficiency. So, the closer you are to room temp, the better the efficiency, but you have a pretty wide range of roughly 90% efficiency. What this means is, even on Vulcan, you can use outside nighttime temperatures to have very good thermal operating efficiency. And because it's outside in the world, you don't have to worry about cooling that thing. Just worry about, hey, is it night? Turn it on. Done. Now Venus, on the other hand, that's much worse. Venus, 460 Celsius. I think that equates to about 12% operating efficiency, which really trashes your ability to generate power. You need a massive temperature differential and a lot of working gas, if you can even make it that far, to get your 8 kilowatts of power, unless you put it in a cooler environment. So that's the environmental efficiency. Let's talk about the pressure differential efficiency. Now, this is something that I don't want you to misunderstand. This, as I will see on the board, is not dependent on pipe pressures. It is not dependent on the input pipe or the output pipe. Yes, that looks like a nice, lovely 2 megapascal-ish difference. That's not what this is talking about. What it is talking about is based on the calculated pressure from the working gas, some of the working gas in the canister, being affected by the hot side temp and the cold side temp. That determines your pressure differential efficiency. And that, of course, goes back to the whole, heat exchange, getting heat from the input pipe, exchanging with the hot side piston, and then the cold side piston exchanges with the outside atmosphere. That's what we're talking about. So to find the pressure differential, if it total pressure differential between the two, that is mathematically delta P equals NR delta T divided by V. I don't know why this came out really weird, but that's not how I typed it in with the labeler. It's literally all NR delta T divided by V. So it's not, yeah, it's weird. So let me break that down a little bit more. N is not the total moles in the canister. It's actually 5 out of 64 of the total moles. Why? Because remember, hot piston side is 5 liters out of 64 total. There's 64 totals in the total capacity in the Stirling. The 54 plus the 2 5s. So it's actually 5 out of 64. Volume will equal 5 because that's how much is in the hot and the cold pistons. And your delta T is, of course, the temperature difference between the hot and the cold side. In this case, you see delta T 1330, 1330 Kelvin versus 276. That's a pretty big delta T difference. So it's going to be really good for my delta P. To get 100%, it's over 2.5 megapascal difference. So yeah, I believe this is linear. So if it's 1250, then you'll be at 50%. So yeah, this definitely hurts power generation if you don't exceed that. So as a case example, say you have a 60 mole working canister. So 5 out of 64 of that is 4.6875. Let's say your hot side temp got 800 Kelvin, cold side got 300 Kelvin, differential of 500. You do your math, delta P, 4.6875, 83144 times 500, which is your difference, divided by 5. Delta P comes out to 3897. Since that's greater than 2.5 megs, perfect 100% efficiency. Now, to get a better number for this, the things you have to keep up with is the more working gas, the tighter your temperature differential has, or the less tight. Hold on. Sorry. The more working gas you have, the less of a delta T you need to hit the max efficiency. Sorry. So like if for this case 60 moles doesn't take as much. If I were to use a working canister of 120 moles, I could work with a much tighter delta T. This is why this calculated number is a starting point, because that was calculated for 2300 Celsius as a starting point. But if you were going to take in 1000 Celsius CO2, however, that this is roughly double the temp of that. So this will be about half of the working gas to stay safe. So you could use roughly double the working gas, and that's why I use 60. Because that's also what's been said a lot in the wiki. But again, that's your starting point. The more working gas you fit, so long as this doesn't go boom, the better your delta P number is. And it also completely relates to the power generation. So once you have your 3 efficiencies, they get multiplied together to get your overall efficiency. Your working gas will really cut it down to 15%. But say you got perfect environment, perfect pressure, that means you're 15% of the generated power. You're going to get 15% of the generated power from the delta Q formula. So power generated is the delta Q times your efficiencies, and it is capped at 8 kilowatts, 8,000 watts. Now, it did the same thing again. Delta Q formula is N times C times your delta T. So once again, delta T plays a role. And once again, number of moles that you calculated in this step also plays a role. So obviously, higher temperature differential and more working gas means better overall power generated. And C is just basically the working gas's specific heat. And for volatiles, 20.4. So, if we do the math for our theoretical situation here, 4.6875, times 20.4 times 500 of differential. Delta Q is 47,812 times 15% power efficiency. That means we're getting about, 7,171 watts. So, almost 7.2 kilowatts. That's a pretty good amount of power generated for this theoretical situation. So, yeah. Again, to get more out of it, you can increase your delta T, so either have hotter gas or a higher density gases, more pressure, or higher density gases like steam. That will make sure that your hot side gets really hot and stays hot. And of course, more working gas means just overall makes it better. Speaking of working gas, when I did the math, nitrous oxide, specific heat 37.2, and it's even if though it has an efficiency of 12%, at this theoretical calculation, it came out with a much higher delta Q, which means also much higher power generated. So could theoretically have capped out the Stirling's energy compared to the volatile case. Now, what I have noticed in practicality is because the N2O has a higher specific heat, it takes in a lot more thermal energy from the hot side, therefore pulling its temp down lower. And it has a harder time releasing it on the cold side, therefore making the cold side hotter. So it restricts the delta T in this case, making it, dropping the delta T. So even though the math is better, maybe the delta T formula, instead of it being 500, it would have been 400, which would have cut into its power generation and potentially its efficiencies and made it perform worse. So, yeah. I'm just saying that because it is something you could work with. And again, to get more out of it, more pressure in the input pipe of high density, high thermal energy gases means you'll get a hotter temperature for longer for the hot side. Then a higher pressurized cold environment will cool the cooler side much more, keeping the cold side down. And that, with enough of a working gas to skirt the line of explosion, would generate you a significant amount of power, but it can also be used for, and I'm going to show you later, Cheese in Venus for a perpetual motion generation, using something where the delta T is not as big as you would normally expect it to be. But we'll get to that later. So let's do some test runs for this. So remember, this is my thermal gas, 32.9, and we're going to see how much it generates. And we're just going to very slowly, 1 liter of hot stuff. So right off the bat, you're going to see the pressure is increasing. That's what you want to watch. It takes a while for that pressure to increase. But you see, I'm generating max power. My hot side is good. My cold side is good. I forgot to turn on my cooling system. And I'm dumping a lot of this thermal energy into the environment. So, yeah. If the delta T was much smaller than what it is now, actually, you see that I'm already generating a little bit less power now. So you see, I'm no longer generating max power. So let's swap it for the 39 mole canister. So the 39 mole canister, you see it's also struggling a little bit, but it's already generating a little bit more power than the other side had. Awesome. But you see, it's still only 2.64 megapascals. So what that means is, theoretically, I should be putting more working gas. 42.9 is enough for it to have exploded in a vacuum with that heat. So let's try it now. Let's see where it gets us to. See, it almost caps us out. But the pressure is still fairly low. Alright. Yeah. This is what I mean about being a careful balance with what you put in there. So now let's try this 150 mole gas, see what that does. I'll see if I can stop it in time. That's a lot of gas, that caused the explosion. We'll see what that does. And you see, because the environment is cooler, it's not getting as hot. I'm getting max power out of it. But also, there's another thing about it. Because there's more working gas, it's dropping the hot side temp a lot. But you see, I'm still safe. Relatively safe. But I am dumping a lot more. I should be dumping a lot more energy into the environment. But as you see, my temperature differential is pretty. It's getting very tight. Yet I'm still generating max power from it. All right, let's try this again. So this is a canister of nitrous oxide. 39 moles, so it's equivalent to the second canister. If I were to slot this and turn it on, once again, you see that it's doing kind of okay. So yeah, it does generate a good chunk of power. But again, because it's nitrous, it absorbs more energy, you see the delta T is dropping much faster. Alrighty. So that basically covers the overall Stirling. But let me tell you that the Stirling isn't just a power generator. It can actually be used as a powered convection radiator. I'm sure you're wondering, what do I mean by that? But okay, so get this. Because it's absorbing and convecting energy into the environment, if you connect the input pipe and the output pipes together, you know, maybe have gases be pumped in and connect pipes together like that. Let's use the hot. No, let's be safe. The 42 one. With the input pipe and the output pipe connected together like this, if you pump some gases in here to cool, like for example, my H2 combustor steam, I want it to be cooled down. If I connect it like this and turn on my Stirling, it's going to be draining the temp for this because, of course, it's convecting to my atmosphere. But also it's generating a little bit of power for me, which is a nice bonus. That's why I said it's technically a powered radiator. That's the neat thing about it. You can use this to cool down something while still generating power. Of course, to speed it up, you know, you need more working gas, but, you know, you're going to have to toe the line very, very carefully with just exactly how much of your working gas you use. As you see, this canister is draining the temperature much faster. Because it's technically that power being generated is how much is also being taken from the hot piston side. So it does, there is extra leeway for it. Now, before I get to the cheese build, I do have to caution you about removing a canister while it's running. When a Stirling is running, if you were to remove the canister, it will turn it off and dump whatever was in that canister into the environment that it is in. So in this case, if I were to slot the 32.9, turn it on, remove it, then I'll get 32.9 moles thrown into my atmosphere here, which may or may not be good. So, but because you can hot swap items, you can combine, so I could combine this 39 mole and 32 mole canister together while it is running. To do that, when the Stirling is on, have your other canister, and then just hot swap it like that. And now you see that my extra gases got added in there. So again, see right now it's 3.3 megapascals, hot swap it. There you go. That's how you can technically add more working gas in there while it is running. But remember that if you remove it outright like this, it turns it off, and now all that working gas is inside my environment. So yeah. So that's what I got on the Stirling. I hope the math helps. Let's go to the cheese build on Venus. So let's be right back. Alright guys, welcome to Venus. So, yes, you can actually make a perpetual motion machine in Venus. It's a little tricky, but you can do it. So, what I have here in this tiny little room, because I didn't want to put it in a small box, is essentially this room is being cooled down by some radiators that are tied to an AC system, which is one of Elmo's hyper efficient AC setups. Should definitely check out that video to for how to set it up. But anyways, so these radiators are cooling down this room, which are in turn cooling down the Stirling. I am drawing hot Venusian air via an active vent in here to the inputs, and basically on the outputs, they're gonna one-way valve out of here. And as you can tell right now, this Stirling, hold on, let me remove the canister. It has 120 moles of volatiles in here, so yeah, it's quite a lot. Not gonna lie, but I've done the math, and what that 120 moles does, I actually could put a little bit more, to be honest, but I wanted to be a little bit safe, mind you. But as you can see, my temperature differential isn't very high. You know, like this is what I'm talking about. It's roughly what 220 delta. But because I have so much working gas, my pressure differential is already 100%. And so now really the only thing that's making this bad is the fact that this environment is not at the 20C. But as you can see, 97%. That's not bad. I'm making 6.3 kilowatts. Now, the reason why I mentioned Elmo's hyper efficient AC is because this battery, there's nothing else charging this battery except the Stirling. And the only thing that's being used from this battery is to power the ACs. And currently, now that that nuclear battery is fully charged, I got to 20%, I'm only using 1.5 kilowatts. Yet generating 6.37 kilowatts of power is insane. So, literally a perpetual motion machine. This thing powers itself to run its own AC to keep itself cool so that it can generate power. It is perpetual motion. It is funny. And I have a second one, but when I turn on the second one, that does increase the power generated. However, the AC cannot keep up with the temperatures, and as you can tell, my temperature will slowly start rising because of both of them. Yep, you see it's rising. It was actually dropping. But now, 11 kilowatts of power for 1.5 kilo. I'm literally making more power than consuming it. So, yeah, that's it's insane how you can actually create a perpetual motion machine in Venus. I don't know. Maybe the devs will fix that eventually. Just to show off what that looks like. This is probably not something you'll get done as soon as you drop down on Venus, mind you. You can get close. But Elmo's hyper efficient AC is basically this setup, you know, the 999 AC with the volume pump and the 270 AC with also volume pump. And yeah, the cold pipe is getting cold, the hot pipe is getting warm. But yes, generating insane amount of power. I also keep cooling down the hot pipes so that I can actually keep the cold pipe cold. And this is my active vent, and this is my cowl, which is poorly placed. But yeah. And this was my other test setup for the perpetual motion, the single cube one. Also the same thing. Again, this battery is charged. The temperature on the inside is getting warm, but that's fine. That's because the only thing I haven't figured out well is how to better balance these. Oh well. Anyways, yeah, you can actually make a perpetual motion machine in Venus. And honestly, the good thing about that would be you can have your Stirling room cooling set up, and then probably have your base one of these if that's what you wish. But yeah, you that's basically an exploit, the cheesy exploit, to have a perpetual motion machine. Honestly, if I could probably expand that so that I can Oh wow, that is charged already. That's insane. Honestly, I could probably expand the AC setup so that it takes more heat so that I can run a second one. It's... yeah. Yeah, there you go, guys. It's literally a Stirling, charges a battery, which charges the power, which does the Elmo hyper-efficient setup. And the only reason I chose that is because I know that it is extremely efficient at what it does. Uh, might be able to get away with phase change. That'll cut some of the power costs down, but you know the Elmo hyper-efficient setup has got to be able to remove most of the energy that the phase change setup has got to remove from this room. Which right now the Stirling is dumping supposedly 5.7 kilojoules. It probably technically dumps a little bit more, but these things are convecting. You know, theoretically they should keep up with 2, but you know, in practice that didn't seem to be the case. Oh well. Anyways, thank you for your time. This is Shadow Drake. Use this at your own peril. Who knows when or if the devs will fix it, but maybe you can make a perpetual motion machine in some other planet. Just remember, Stirlings technically delete heat when they generate power, so you still got to be getting power from somewhere, or you got to be getting heat from somewhere. Alrighty, hope to see you later. Thank you and have a good rest of the day, guys. Bye bye.